Okay, welcome everyone. I am Murat Aslan. I am the Vice Director of Ankara Center for Iranian Studies. Today we are concentrated on three important countries in international global domain. Today we are going to talk about Iran, United States, and China. Since we are Center for Iranian Studies, Iran is on the center, and the other two hegemonic powers are going to be discussed by a young and brilliant scholar, Dr. Faruk. Welcome, Dr. Faruk. Before giving you to microphone, I would like to introduce you to our audience. Because the topic is very hot, very timely, and the interaction, complexity, and dynamics, these are all very complicated issue, and we give this job to task to fulfill by Dr. Faruk. And Dr. Faruk, Muhammad Bakr Faruk, has a PhD from International Relation from University of Groningen, and his research area is geopolitical risk analysis at Clennendale Institute of International Relation at Hague, and he is also research fellow at Leiden University Asia Center. He also previously assistant professor at University of Leiden, and his area of interest is mainly Iran, Middle East, but his main dominant, research area is in international political economy. By referencing those international political economic framework, his concentration is basically China, Iran, and Middle Eastern affairs, and also recently he's doing some cyber security stuff. Okay, before leaving the microphone to Dr. Faruk, I want to remind our audience that they may type question in YouTube tab. After Dr. Faruk finishes presentation, I am going to allow him to address those questions. Without further ado, I will give the microphone to Dr. Faruk. And again, I would like to welcome Dr. Faruk, and I would like to thank, on behalf of Center for Iranian Studies, for accepting our invitation. Okay, Dr. Faruk, the floor is yours, and please enlighten us in terms of recent developments in the United States, in China, in Iran.
Hi, thanks a lot, Dr. Aslan. Thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to be in conversation with you. Can you see my slides, or do you just see me?
Okay, it is open, Dr. Faruk. Yes, we can see. We see Zarif. We see Amane.
The slides are visible now.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So to start the conversation, I will first discuss the background of Jcpoa and basically what kind of processes, global processes, were involved behind this, you can call it nuclear deal or peace deal between Iran and the world powers. Most importantly, Obama is or the administration of Obama is at stake here. So first I'll discuss what kind of worldview or strategy Obama had. If you look at, it's very hard to define a global strategy or global doctrine for Obama's two terms. But if we really try to come up with one of the most important aspects of Obama's global policy was the pivot to Asia. So Obama noticed that America had basically wasted a lot of time, resources, and energy in the Middle East. In the meantime, China was rising as a global power, and America was not managing the rise of China successfully because it was stuck in the Middle East. So one of the main turning points in American foreign policy under Obama was basically the pivot to Asia. Hillary Clinton called this century the America's Pacific century. In order to pivot to Asia, so when you pivot to somewhere, you have to pivot away from somewhere else. So America had to pivot away from the Middle East. This created a lot of tension between America and Middle Eastern powers, especially Middle Eastern allies of America, such as Saudi Arabia and Israel. One of the basic assumptions of Obama's pivot to Asia was the fact that Middle Eastern powers such as Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia have to learn how to share the Middle East together. So sharing the Middle East was part of the strategy of Obama when it comes to this region. America wanted to make sure that no single regional power would manage to completely dominate regional dynamics. So sharing the region. In the meantime, his administration's approach to Iran was cyber war. We're all aware of this Stuxnet virus that wreaked havoc on some aspects of Iranian nuclear development, or nuclear industry rather. Sanctions, Obama introduced very harsh sanctions against Iran, diplomacy that led to the Jcpoa, and threats of war. It was always there, Obama talking about how all options are on the table. In the meantime, Iran developed an approach that is best called looking to the east or pivoting to the east, that I will discuss later when it comes to Iran-China relations. Iran got closer to Turkey and Russia in the meantime because of this. Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and you can say Bahrain, they developed not really a partnership, but they got closer to each other because they felt that America is leaving them behind. It's basically, to use their own terminology, appeasing Iran. And they decided to become more self-reliant in securing themselves in the region. So part of that was they also pivoted to Asia, and then they started normalizing relations, which culminated in the normalization deals of last year in the region. So these are some of the dynamics that were either important before Jcpoa came into effect or after it came into effect. And then you have Donald Trump, who in 2018 basically withdrew from the deal. And then with that, the Iranian economy and the Iranian currency experienced a great amount of pressure. So you can see here on the right side of the screen that Iranian oil output drops significantly in 2018 in the immediate aftermath of the Trump withdrawal from the nuclear deal. If you look at here, you can see that the Iranian currency is getting devalued significantly. There are some important moments in this devaluation. This is, for instance, 2018, May, the start of the significant rise in the devaluation of the Iranian currency, rial. Here you have January 2020, another start of a boost in devaluation. This is coincidental with the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani. And more recently, after the American elections, which was a couple of months ago, which was last November, basically, you can see that the real gains some value because the tensions are a little bit eased now that now that the people in the Iranian economy and the global economy became aware that Trump is not going to have a second administration. Now let's go to the Biden presidency. As presidential candidate, Biden supported what he called a clear-eyed, hard-nosed diplomacy that is grounded in strategy. So what kind of strategy? I would argue that the Biden presidency is, in a manner of speaking, the third term for Obama, because basically a similar set of people, sometimes an identical set of people, are basically running the State Department and other departments in the American government. Biden himself was very supportive of the nuclear deal with Iran, multilateral diplomacy around the world, also containing China. So basically this is, like I said once, in a manner of speaking, Obama's third term we're experiencing, I would say. So from the American perspective, the Iranian nuclear issue is definitely not a priority. The priorities for America would include the current pandemic that we're all experiencing, the vaccine rollout in the US, which is not going any better than during the Trump administration. Unemployment is through the roof. Cyber defense is becoming an issue. 2 months ago, we had, or America experienced one of the worst cyber attacks that it has ever experienced. Called the SolarWinds breach or attack, if you want to call it. They attributed it to Russia, but that remains to be seen. They want to contain the rise of China, a job that started under the Obama administration. It was heavily intensified under Trump, and now Biden has to continue the job. So Iran, or the nuclear deal with Iran, is definitely not on top of the agenda. It is on the agenda, but certainly not the top three, I would say. Another important thing to note is that if nothing changes in the Iran nuclear deal situation, the US stands to benefit more, or basically to lose less. So it is Iran that is losing economic power, currency, value, and such. So Iran has to raise the urgency of the issue. One important point that is currently obstructing the Jcpoa negotiations, or lack thereof, between the two countries, Iran and the US, is the question of who should move first. Iran is asking for tangible actions from the US. The Iranian Supreme Leader Khamenei has asked for that. On the other hand, Americans have asked Iran to first abide by the deal, and then they will rejoin the deal. So it's a question of who should move first. The American Secretary of the State, Mr. Blinken, has said that the path to diplomacy is open. In the meantime, America is showing force, or displaying force in the region by flying B-52 bombers, which are nuclear capable as well. You can also assume that we can assume that there's a continuation of cyber warfare and other types of shadow warfare between these powers, America and Iran. 2020 unexplained explosions in Iran point to that assumption. If you look at the story from the Iranian perspective, you can see that Iran is definitely suffering more because of the intensification of the sanctions regime under the Trump administration, economic pressure, currency devaluation, as I mentioned before. So Iran has to raise the urgency of the issue at the global level. That's why they started enriching uranium up to 20%. They are installing or threatening to install new advanced centrifuges, and they are also allegedly, at least America is alleging that Iran is escalating the military situation in Iraq, in Erbil recently, in recent days. Ayatollah Khamenei has said that we accept action, not promises, because they have broken promises. Rouhani has promised to return to the deal if and when 5+1 returns to the deal. Mr. Zarif, the foreign minister, has said that the situation needs a coordinator or a choreographer, someone like the head of European foreign policy team, or a country like Switzerland or whoever that can coordinate both countries into getting back into full compliance with the deal. In the meantime, so this is the dynamics that Iran is experiencing with the US. In the meantime, as I said, Iran, because of the pressures that it has been experiencing from its Western counterparts, it has developed a policy of looking to the East. So what I talked about up to now constitutes Iranian geopolitics. So I will talk about Iranian geoeconomics a little bit. That's one aspect of Iranian foreign policy that usually gets ignored, but it is, I would argue, equally important. So on this side of the world, we have China. On this side, we have the EU. Usually when people discuss Iran, they discuss Iranian geopolitics in relation to Iraq. So GP stands for geopolitics. In relation to Iraq, in relation to Syria, the Persian Gulf area, relations with the UAE, Qatar, Yemen, and of course the rivalry that exists between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But if you look at the Iranian geoeconomics in the region, you can see that Iran is getting connected to China in the Belt and Road geography, first through the China-Pakistan economic corridor. China-Pakistan economic corridor is complex, so I don't have time to get into all the details of it. But when it comes to Iran, it is one way of connecting the Iranian landmass and the Iranian economy, and to some extent national interest, to China. And it also connects to Iranian-Turkish relations. So recently, in recent weeks, Iran, Turkey, and Pakistan have been talking about reviving the Islamabad, Tehran, Istanbul railway, which is supposed to connect this region, the broader Middle East, to China and Europe. Iran is also connected to China on the Belt and Road geography through the Central Asia, West Asia corridor. So that's another way it is connected to not only China, but in this case, Central Asia as well. Iran hopes to basically become the connection between China to Europe through Turkey, and then via Turkey 17+1 to the rich Western European markets. It is also heavily invested in the Indian initiated internet. It's not exactly India initiated, but these days India is the bigger driver behind it. It's called the International North-South Transit Corridor. So India is investing in the port of Chabahar, for instance. For India, Iran is indispensable because Iran constitutes the only gateway that India has to Asian landmass. Through Iran, India can connect to Europe, connect its economy and its geoeconomics basically to Europe, to Afghanistan, to compete with China, that is investing in Pakistan. It can connect to the Caucasus and Central Asia. So basically, Iran, that at least in this current political establishment, that was started with the slogan "Neither West nor East," meaning the geopolitical, ideological, bipolar world that was the world of Cold War. Geoeconomically, Iran is trying to connect to both East and West, and also both North and South. Iran is also interacting with the Eurasian Economic Union of Russia that has a preferential trade agreement with Iran. So in this sense, Iran is trying to become a civilizational and economic crossroads between different economies and civilizations. This would be my final slide. In more recent years, China and Iran have been in the business of solidifying their relationship by signing what is known as a 25-year roadmap, or some people call it 25-year deal, or comprehensive strategic partnership. This partnership, which was revealed or officially acknowledged last year, gives a framework to a bunch of affinities and cooperations that Iran and China already have in the realm of, in the economic and political realms, basically. It is part of what the Iranian supreme leader has called the Look East policy. So there's too much to tell about all these details that I passed through very quickly, but I will stop here to basically address any questions that might pop up from the moderator or from the audience. I cannot hear you, Dr. Aslam.
Okay, I think you're here now. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah. And I am going to ask the first question. I am also looking at YouTube tab for question. But if there is no question, I can ask like few questions my own. The first question is, since you are living in Europe, in Holland, and Dr. Zarif brought the issue that European countries should kind of find a solution between Iran and the United States, taking some steps towards like reconciling the difference between the US and Iran. So what's your personal opinion about, like, you know, how can European countries, at this A3 countries, can step forward to reconcile the difference between the United States and Iran? What's your personal opinion?
Thanks for the question. And it's a good question. Europeans have been trying to negotiate a deal, or to bring these two actors together, not very successfully. This goes to the larger question of the position of Europe in the world, I would say. So Europeans have been talking about the idea of a strategic autonomy for Europe in recent years. And part of this strategic autonomy is for European countries to be able to develop an independent foreign policy, independent of the US. So, and of course, since the end of the Second World War, European countries have been completely reliant on the security umbrella of the US, and they have been in the business of reconstructing Europe. They reconstructed Europe. Now Europe is doing well. It's the largest, or one of the largest economic blocs in the world, arguably the largest. And now, since especially since the Trump administration came into power, they have been talking about the idea of developing an independent European foreign policy and security policy. And part of that has been to negotiate a separate deal with China independent of the US, to work with Iran independent of the US. But of course, in many ways, Europeans are still dependent on the US. So they cannot be fully independent at the moment. President Macron has even talked about the need for a European army to develop. In the case of Iran, I was part of some of the conversations in Europe. Most of the conversations concluded in that, okay, we are unable to have a meaningful impact we, the Europeans, are unable to bring a meaningful solution to the problem of the Iran nuclear deal, because we cannot push the US around. Because Iran was already complying, but they could not leverage the Trump administration to go back to the deal. They, of course, said things politically, diplomatically, like the US should get back to the deal and such, but it was not effective. So I don't think Europe still has, in the larger picture of the world, has developed sufficient strategic autonomy to be able to single-handedly have a meaningful impact on the deal. They can help, of course, but alone they cannot do the job.
Okay. One question from audience, but before I read that question, I have another question. As you know, your expertise is in China, and when we look at Chinese data, China's economic progress since the early 1980s has been incredible. In terms of several measures, China is either surpassed or about to catching up the United States. In addition to this economic accomplishment, China's strategic discourse for the last 10 years has been more assertive and more confrontational compared to the previous decades. For example, Belt and Road initiatives, Asian development banks, and other policies, not only in Asia, but in Africa, in even Latin America. So given this fact, there are so many areas, competition areas between the United States and China. So one of the most important and critical, the battlefield between these two hegemonic powers in Middle East. And Iran is also playing certain important role in terms of the policies regarding the Middle East. So given the energy dependence of China and the new markets that China wants to sell its products and other objectives of China, so what next 10 or 20 years we are expecting this rivalry in general, but in particular, what can we expect by focusing on Middle East? Okay, we understand the American priority is moving towards Asia, especially containment of China. But by doing so, there are also some maybe secondary steps which may be very important to containment of China in the Middle East. So what is your personal opinion? How can United States use Middle Eastern policy as a leverage to really deal with China?
Well, the question of China and the Middle East in the upcoming years, well, first of all, it's impossible to predict. But if we just look at the current existing trends and assume that the world will go on based on these trends and there will be no major change, I would say that China in the next few years will become by far the #1 geoeconomic partner in the region. That's why you can see that almost all countries in the region are very excited to be part of the BRI or somehow to be connected to Chinese economic foreign policy, at least, if not political adventures outside. So one important sign or piece of evidence you can see for how dominant China is getting in the region, geoeconomically speaking, is that all regional powers, including Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, are all super excited to be part of the connectivity projects of China, which usually come together under the umbrella of the BRI, or the Belt and Road Initiative. Gulf countries are all looking towards China. After decades of America being the #1 trade partner of Saudi Arabia, China is now the #1 trade partner of Saudi Arabia. It is the #1 trade partner of Iran. And it is one of the top trade partners of Turkey and Israel as well. Another piece of evidence for how China is getting so dominant and so popular in the region is that despite the fact that China is doing or developing questionable policies in its Xinjiang province, not many countries in the region, especially countries such as Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, that usually claim to be leaders of the Muslim world, do not really raise the issue with Chinese politicians because they don't want to make China angry, and they don't want China to dissociate or to get distant from their countries. So the very silence of the region on the Uyghur issue, I would say, is one important piece of evidence for how popular and dominant China is getting in the region. So I don't have a real answer for your question. I can just tell you that in the next few years, you'll see, if there's no big major transformation in the region, and if the same trends continue, we will continue to see a clash, not a direct clash, but a dynamic in which geopolitically America will be hyperactive in the region, and China will be geoeconomically the dominant actor in the region. And the interaction or the interlinkage between the geoeconomics and geopolitics will be increasingly important. We can discuss it case by case, but you can see, for instance, in the case of Iran, you can see that geopolitically, Iran is under a major sanctions regime by the West, by the US in particular, but it is geoeconomically increasingly connected with China. That's why I decided to discuss China in this brief talk, because usually the conversations about, or the topics relating to geoeconomics get ignored in the bigger geopolitical pictures, but they're equally important. Part of the whole problem that Obama introduced as a policy agenda for the US is that we're forgetting China while getting stuck in the Middle East. So I think analysts sometimes make the same mistake of forgetting geoeconomics and only discussing geopolitics.
Okay, Dr. Faruk, thank you for answering my questions. There are questions from audience, and I would like to ask them to you, maybe rephrasing those questions. Selçuk asked a question during the Obama era. His foreign policy towards Middle East is kind of destroy the equilibrium balance in the Middle East, and he is opening up the very flexible space for Iran forward movement. But at the same time, during the Obama era, Saudi Arabia, Turkey is pretty much those policies prevent these countries to really rebalance the strengthening of Iran. Right now, Trump changed this policy and do the opposite and open up the Saudis objectives. However, right now Biden is going to complete the switch from Trump to Obama period, or do you think he might pursue more balanced approach, try to balance the long-term equilibrium in the region between Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey? So, what is your personal opinion? How Biden is going to conduct foreign policy in Middle East about the equilibrium among these three important countries?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I have to disagree a little bit about the framing of the question, because I don't think Obama really wanted to push Iran into a dominant position, the Obama administration. As I discussed at the beginning of the lecture, in the background of Jcpoa, the approach that the Obama administration had was to basically remove the complete or the dominant focus that American foreign policy had on the Middle East for decades, and move away from the Middle East, not completely away, but reduce the attention that American foreign policy was paying to the region. And when it comes to the equilibrium between the three dominant powers in the region, Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, as far as I have understood Obama's doctrine, the idea was to basically make these powers share the neighborhood, like having zones of influence. So Iran having its own zone of influence, Saudi Arabia having its own sphere of influence, and Turkey having its own sphere of influence. And Obama himself said in the interview that he had with the Atlantic, the interview was with Jeffrey Goldberg, he said that these three countries have to learn how to share the neighborhood. So Obama wanted no single power to become completely dominant in the region. That was his approach. And I think, based on my assumption that the Biden administration, this administration from President Biden, is practically the third administration of Obama, or Obama's team, basically, you can assume that it's going to be the same policy as Obama. Basically, the policy will be working with Iran, but also working with Turkey and Saudi Arabia, and not allowing, as far as possible for the US, not allowing any one of them to completely dominate the system in the region. So that would be my prediction when it comes to Biden's approach to these three powers in the region.
Of view, Dr. Faruk, during the Obama era, in order to really achieve this nuclear deal, Obama sometimes closed his eyes about the foreign policy pursued by Iran, although it damaged the balance in the region. So the ultimate objective of the Obama is to succeed this Jcpoa. So given this objective, sometimes he closes his eyes about the interest of Saudis and Turkey. This is how we read from Turkey, the Obama foreign policy. Also, if Biden might pursue more balanced approach, and as far as we understand, although Iranian side feel that Biden is going to really reverse to Trump's policies and just remove some of the sanctions at least. But as we understand, Biden is not going to follow these naive steps to just remove all the sanctions that Iran is expected. So probably Biden is going to follow a little bit wait and see approach and step forward by looking at the steps by the Iranian policies. This is my personal assessment. Given Biden's administration foreign policy's main points, so what is your expectation about the relation between Iran and Turkey? So whether they are going to compete or they are going to collaborate during the Biden administration?
I think Iran and Turkey are going to both collaborate and compete like they did in the past. The relationship between Iran and Turkey is very multifaceted, and it cannot be assumed that it will transform based on one or another American president. An American president can add one new dimension to the Iranian-Turkish relations, but it cannot completely transform Iranian-Turkish relations. So I think Iran and Turkey, for instance, take the case of Syria. In the beginning, Iran and Turkey were fighting on completely opposite sides. And later on, they started working with Russia in a trilateral approach. They started working on the Astana peace process. And so you can see that even in one situation, such as the Syrian civil war, moving from one year to another year, the Iranian-Turkish relations completely change. So, sorry. So I would say Iran and Turkey will collaborate in many areas, but also compete, such as in the case of Iraq. You can see that there are some tensions already between some groups that are associated with the Iranian political and military establishment, and some groups such as the Kurdish autonomous government that are trying to work with the US and with Turkey. So in Iraq, they will compete. In Syria, they will continue to collaborate, at least as far as we can see into the future. When it comes to Saudi Arabia, Turkish-Saudi relations are undergoing some transformations. You know the topic much better than I do. If Turkey and Saudi Arabia continue to create more distance between themselves, I'm guessing, my guess would be Iran and Turkey will get closer. Turkey and Iran both found common ground in the case of Qatar and the blockade of Qatar by Saudi Arabia and UAE and Egypt. So you can see that the Turkish-Iranian relations are very complex, and they are changing from year to year depending on regional dynamics and country dynamics. And a new American president can add only one new dimension. It cannot completely transform these multifaceted relations.
Okay, finally, Attila, let me check his name again. Attila Arslan, I'm sorry. Attila Arslan asked very critical question. Although in international relations, it is not easy to switch one structure to another. But we are all rational, man, and in Washington D.C. there are lots of smart and rational people. The question is, since China is rising, and probably in 10 years later, the Chinese power is much stronger than right now, relative to the United States at least. So given this fact, it might seem that maybe collaboration of United States, Iran, and India might be more productive approach for the interest of the United States relative to current condition. So according to the audience, Attila Arslan asking, do you think there is some grant to cooperation between Iran, India, and other countries, given Chinese weakness in terms of energy dependency? If United States really collaborate Iran and other Middle Eastern countries as well as India to contain China, it might be more smart approach for containment policy, but United States instead, really focusing on really taking Iran as enemy seat rather than friendship. So do you think there is a possibility that a strategic intelligence in Washington, D.C. dominate, and let's stop really fighting against Iran and let's collaborate with Iran and put Iran our side to deal with China? So do you think there is a possibility, strategic, ideas in Washington that they may pursue this type of interesting foreign policy in the future?
I think you can never say that it is impossible, but I would say, given the track record that Iran and the US have had in the region against each other, it is next to impossible to imagine that Iran and the US would become allies against China. It is, like I said, you can never completely remove that possibility, but it's definitely not probable. Not in the near predictable future. Of course, the assumption of the question is correct that yes, if America wants to act extremely rationally, I would say yes, it has to collaborate with Iran, it has to collaborate with Russia even, if it wants to contain the rise of China. But the critical analysis of American foreign policy would be that when you start portraying another country, another actor such as Russia, such as Iran, for decades and decades and decades as your enemy, then you cannot, and then you develop policies, you develop sanctions against those countries. You cannot overnight change that policy and bring everything back and say, okay, now I want to be friends with you to contain the rise of China. The assumption is very reasonable, it's very rational. If the US wants to contain China, it has to work with Iran and Russia to make it easier, but I don't think it will be possible or probable in the near future.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Attila's question, and I just interpret and ask the same question. I agree, path dependency. It is not easy to make enemy to be friend overnight. It takes lots of time. I agree with you. And finally, this is also my question. You also watch closely the Iranian news, and presidential election is coming in Iran. So what is your elaboration? What is your assessment about upcoming election in Iran? Do you have specific candidates that might get into the race and win the election with respect to hardliners and more democratic line of the politics? So what is your expectation in the next election in May? So which side is going to be the winner of the election?
Yeah, so about the elections, there are a couple of important things to note here. One is that a lot of analysts are predicting that the conservatives will win. If I had to bet on who wins, I would say that the conservatives will win, but you never know for sure, of course. That's one thing to note. In terms of specific candidates, I don't know of anyone who has established himself or herself as the candidate to be. So there, among the conservatives, there's still a lot of power play going on now that especially a lot of reformists have been basically pushed aside. The conservatives are trying to put their acts together and introduce a candidate. And then when it comes to, so that would be my prediction, that a conservative candidate would win. And then what effect that would have on the Iran nuclear deal, I would say not a lot, because the Iran nuclear deal and the strategy that the Iranian political establishment has towards negotiations with global powers is not dependent on who's the president. So if no matter a conservative or a reformist candidate winning, you can argue that the Iranian nuclear deal strategy will still be, the broad outline of it will still be determined by the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, and then the president will follow suit, because that has historically been the case. So Iran will continue to engage world powers no matter who wins in the elections.
Okay, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and this wonderful, really explanation to question, and also wonderful presentation, Dr. Mohammed Bakir Farooq. I would like to thank for myself and also on behalf of Ankara Center for Iranian Studies. And for the audience, as you see, the foreign policy is a little bit different than individual decision. Sometimes we also make irrational choices, but anyway, in international relation, although some choices might be more rational than others, but countries still can choose semi-rational options rather than full rational options because of some structural reason. So I think at least today lecture we see there are some continuity in terms of struggle in the Middle East, but also we expect Biden administration bring some changes specifically in Iran and also in Middle East. And we are hoping that this outbreak is going to be ended soon, and people are getting their normal life, and also inshallah we are going to see calm and more stable Middle East in the future. Dr. Mohammed Bakir Farooq, I would like to thank you for this wonderful lecture and your patience about answering my humble questions as well as a question of our audience. And also, I would like to thank audience for asking questions. So for next panels by İRAM, we expect our audience to follow us. And I am hoping that have a good afternoon and see you in our future events. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.